The rate at which murder investigations in the U.S. are being solved has dipped to an all-time low.
That's right. FBI data shows barely half of all homicide cases lead to an arrest. According to these figures, more than 90% of murders were being solved in the mid-1960s. But in 2020, the national clearance rate dropped to about 50% for the first time ever, even as the number of homicides soared. In the CBS News Crime Without Punishment series, reporter Wilson Walker from our San Francisco Bay Area station, KPIX5, investigates this issue by analyzing it through the lens of his community.
It's devastating. It's devastating to see how my brother went out, and there's no answers to it. There's no answers, no answers.
Elaine Marks Bell lost her brother on Christmas Day 2019. 61-year-old Jimmy Marks was shot and killed on a sidewalk along East 16th Street. Initially, police told the family they had leads, but no one came forward as a witness. 2.5 years later, the family is still waiting.
You're just kind of out here wondering, where's the killer? What happened? This is going to be unsolved is it forever? Or, you just don't know anything. And that is the part of the grief that it just stays there.
The Marks family is hardly alone as homicides have risen again in Oakland in recent years. The clearance rate has fallen. In 2020, it dropped to about 47% and below the national average of 51.6%. The numbers across the Bay, however, very different.
The police department just announced the arrest of 4 suspects in homicide cases.
With roughly twice the population of Oakland, San Francisco sees about half as many homicides, and the clearance rate has risen to 75%, well above the national average. And for that, San Francisco police credit 2 things.
We have to have the staffing to do that. We also have to have community support.
And what I'm acknowledging is that it won't be solved just by law enforcement, that this solution will have to be a collaborative approach.
We need care. Back in Oakland, police have long said they need more community help to both prevent and solve homicides.
People don't talk. They're afraid to talk.
It's hurtful, but it's not shocking that that's the way it happened, considering the relationship between the police and the community over there.
We're talking about using technology like surveillance cameras and deploying those. We're talking about addressing the witnesses, bringing more resources to witness protection, to support folks, incentives to come forward.
Oakland Councilmember Lauren Taylor says reducing violence will take long-term investments in communities, but short-term, he says solving murders can be its own form of violence prevention.
Studies also show that when we have a higher solve rate of these crimes, we have less retaliatory gunfire, and it limits the increase in actual homicides and gun violence cases. So it all ties together.
We are left with this gaping wound, this emptiness of what happened to our relative. Are we ever going to get justice?
The Marks say the passage of time has been discouraging, but they're trying to stay hopeful that police or someone in the community will eventually move their case forward.
It was just today it's just hard to even talk about because it's just no justice for people that's trying to do the right thing out here.
Now, both the Oakland and San Francisco police departments declined to speak with us on camera for this story. We have put more data and information on the clearance rates here in the Bay Area on our website, kpix.com. Nikki, Tanya?
And Wilson, it seems that the city of Oakland reflects some of the national trends we're seeing in homicide clearance rates. Can you discuss that?
Absolutely. Oakland, if you go back 10 years ago, Oakland saw about 130 homicides. And over the course of about a decade, they made incredible progress on that. They got the number down below 70. This is something the city was lauded for. City leaders in Oakland constantly sort of spoke proudly of the progress that they have made. So as the national homicide rate has jumped significantly, Oakland absolutely reflects that. They lost a lot of progress in really just a year or two. And with that, we have seen the corresponding decline in clearance rates. Now, one differential here, I've been watching the stories coming from different cities around the country. New York, for example, pointed to a real disparity in demographics among which cases were getting solved, whites versus blacks, for example. That does not show up in Oakland. In fact, the numbers white and black are almost identical. So in most respects, yes, Oakland's sort of following the national trend lines.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Wilson, as you know, in San Francisco, voters recently ousted their district attorney over concerns about crime. What are these concerns and why have they become so prominent?
I think this is a really important distinction to be made here. A lot of people probably have heard about crime in San Francisco and the dispatching of the district attorney. There are homicides in San Francisco, and the number has gone up in the last year or so. But the baseline where you were starting in San Francisco was actually quite low. For a large city and a pretty dense population here in San Francisco, violent crime is relatively low. On the other hand, property crime is high. And you can see how that disparity sort of drove a conversation in the city. Crime is up, crime is down. Well, what kind of crime are you talking about? It really provoked a real pointed debate in the city over the last couple of years. Now, if you talk to someone in San Francisco who is upset about crime, maybe someone who voted for the ousting of the district attorney, and you ask them what they're upset about, it would probably sound something like, go to any neighborhood in the city and you're going to see shattered car windows and some poor family of tourists' belongings scattered along the sidewalk, or maybe something like, we're running out of homes on our street that have not been burglarized. It seems to be the same person coming back and doing this again and again, and what is going on? That is a different concern than what you might hear from Oakland. If you go to Oakland and talk to people about their crime concerns, depending on what neighborhood they might live in, that may very well sound like we are afraid to leave our house at night because there's a lot of gunfire, more than a few people getting killed, some of them randomly. So there's two different discussions, and I think a reminder that what crime is and people's perspective on crime has a lot to do with where you are. And in this case, you have two cities on opposite ends of a bridge having effectively a very different conversation about crime.
Really, really interesting. A lot of people having conversations about crime these days. Wilson Walker from CBS News Bay Area, thanks so much for joining us.